This is Canada Reads American Style, featuring two friends who love Canada Reads and Canadian literature. Welcome our host Rebecca from Michigan and Tara from Ontario. Hi everyone, it is Rebecca and Tara, and today we have our, I hope, which it gets to be annual for many, many years to come, but we have our annual wrap-up of the Eden Mills Writers Festival, which Tara will talk about in detail in just a minute here. But before we get started, I am going to ask you, Tara, what are you currently reading?
Okay, I am currently reading a cozy mystery, so it's called Instagoner by Leigh. It came out on August 27th, and I'm actually reading an arc, even though it published a few weeks ago. And I'm excited because Leigh, I'm talking to her, I think, later this week, so the episode will be published later this month, about the book, of course, and the process of writing a cozy fiction. And because it is obviously its own genre. I'm not like saying like something whirlwind or anything here, but I find it really interesting when I'm reading a cozy mystery. Usually it's just for like a palate cleanser.
Mm-hmm.
But reading this one in prep to speak to the author, I'm kind of like looking at it as how you write, like the elements of a cozy fiction and putting them together to like make a cozy fiction that people are going to enjoy and want to return to.
And I assume, is it a series then?
Yes, this is book one
Okay.
of, I think it's called Barker and Blog series, because the main character is a blogger, social influencer, and she has a dog. It's kind of cute, actually. Very cute.
Okay, any book with a dog in it is, I'm sold. I love it.
Yeah, and he's very cute. Murray. It's a great name too, right?
That's cute.
Yeah.
I like that.
And what about you? What are you reading?
I am finally reading The Green Book, which has been announced so many times over the past year. It's ridiculous. But I will say this about it. I do have one. I've got maybe about 60 pages left, but I'm going to say it now because I have to. I feel compelled to say it. It's about, the Green Book was the book that African Americans used from 1936 to basically 1966 to find businesses, hotels, restaurants, etc., where if they were doing a road trip, they would be able to find Black-owned businesses to be safer on the road, right? So it's an absolutely fascinating history. The book is fascinating, but here's my big question. And the person that wrote it, Alvin Hall, I think it is, he did a road trip from like Detroit down to Louisiana, whatever. Anyway, you would think he would write it as like an on the road kind of book, so that as he goes to all these places, you would get a sense of, hey, we start out in Detroit, we go here, da 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 da. It would be an actual road trip book about a road trip book, right? Yeah, no, he didn't do that. It's bizarre to me. So I'm enjoying it. It's absolutely historically fascinating. But I just feel like he missed a really big opportunity to write a book that the sort of the outline of it could have been completely, or the style of it could have been completely different. And I think it actually would have been a better book. I think he just missed an opportunity there. So that's all I'll say right now. But I am really enjoying it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. It sounds like it would just be a natural element to the book.
Exactly.
Right?
Yes. That is exactly it. And I there is one big thing I won't say now because I'm going to do a teaser. So for our next book chat, there is one thing that's very, very, very cool that I discovered about my hometown that is as a result of this book that I'm going to do a little bit deeper dives in it. And I'm really excited about it because you have to stay tuned for what I'm going to do, because maybe by then I will have done some of it and I will be able to share it on our next book chat.
I'm intrigued.
It is. It's really, I mean, it's the kind of thing about reading historical nonfiction that just gets me really, really excited, but it adds a component that is just so cool. And when people hear it, maybe they'll go out and do it for their own communities as well. It's very, very cool. So there's my little teaser for the book.
Awesome. Okay. Shall we move on to the reason that we're here?
Yes.
All right. So Eden Mills Writers Festival. Rebecca and I met up with a couple of our friends. So like Colleen, friend of the podcast, and my mom, so mom of the podcast and an aunt of the podcast. And we went to Eden Mills in Ontario. So the Eden Mills Writers Festival is an annual event that's going on. It's been 30 plus years, 30 years, 25 plus for sure. I know it's been a while. And it takes a whole Sunday in September. So this year it was on September 8th. The village of Eden Mills closes down to vehicular traffic, and it's only pedestrian, and you go from site to site listening to authors read from their books. And now they've introduced a new element a few years ago, and that it's also become discussion as well. So it used to be originally when I went that each author would be an hour-long session. Generally, you'd have 3 authors, and they would read for 20 minutes each from their book. It's now become like a 5-minute read from their work, and then it's questions, open to questions and discussion, even from the audience and stuff. Then you have time in between to visit the Bookshelf, which is the independent bookstore in Guelph. They have a table set up, and then independent small publishers have tables set up. You can visit them. Local authors have little tables set up. And then you can grab a coffee, grilled cheese sandwich.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best day. It is the best day.
Yeah. I'm only 2 years in, but it is something I look forward to, and I hope it goes on for many, many, many more years, because it is just the best day ever.
Yeah.
For book people, if you're even remotely close, I highly recommend that you attend, because it is just so much fun.
Yeah. And you're like, for Canadian, it's all Canadian authors, and you're going to get big names, and you're going to get like up and coming authors you haven't heard of before. And it's just like a wonderful exposure to whatever kind of literature you want. It's really a special moment.
Yeah. And one of the things I love is that it really is, you're supporting these, authors, like you say, up and coming authors, or established authors who maybe are with independent presses that have more difficulty getting the word of mouth out there. Right. So, and that's kind of some of the books that I bought today. I kind of feel that might be where some of these authors might live in their careers. And I'm just so excited to be able to support them. It's just such a fun day. And there is nothing more beautiful than this quaint town of Eden Mills. What a beautiful setting. Absolutely.
So the day it's comprised of 4 sessions, and each session is an hour long, and there are multiple locations. So 4, maybe 3 or 4 locations, right, Rebecca? So you have your choice. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to make a difficult choice about which author you want to see, because you're not always going to get to see your favorite author. You've got to make a choice.
Yeah.
You're going to be in the meadow. You're going to be in the cottage. Sometimes you can't. Never can you be in the same place. I was going to say sometimes you can't be, but never can you be in the same place. So Rebecca and I both started our day off in the first session and did the same session together. And then we split our ways, and we would see each other in passing. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of the day. Yeah. So let's start. The first session we both attended was titled These Words at This Moment. And it was the 2 authors. We had Carol Off, who was a former journalist with CBC. And her latest book is called At a Loss for Words, Conversations in an Age of Rage. And the author who we were both really there to see was Tanya Talaga with her new book called The Knowing. Rebecca, let's hear your thoughts.
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, I didn't know who Carol Off was. She was absolutely fascinating. And I was a little worried about her book only because it had these words like freedom and democracy and woke and all these words that she sort of writes about and the meaning of them and how it's shifted, et cetera. And I was a little worried because those are all trigger words for me in the US politically and stuff. So I was kind of a little nervous about it. But the book sounds fabulous. And I'm still not quite sure I would read it just because of all of that. But she was a fascinating speaker. I loved it. And then Tanya, oh my gosh, when she read the opening part of her book, it just gave me chills. I cannot wait to read that. I'm going to wait a little bit, but she is, she makes me speechless, honestly.
Mhm.
She's just so, I don't know even what, all the superlative adjectives you could apply to someone. I don't even know. She's one of my all-time favorite Indigenous writers, Canadian writers, whatever, people, female writers, whatever, name all the different things. She's at the top of my list. She's phenomenal. And I
Yeah.
assume you kind of feel the same way.
Oh, the exact same way. I will say, even before they started speaking, when she went up onto the stage, she had a black, like, sateen jacket on, and she turned around, and on the back in letters was a lineage of matriarchal badasses or something like that. And I'm just
Yeah.
like, oh, God, that's the best jacket. The best jacket. I'm like, it just kind of set the mood for the talk before it even started. It was perfect.
I only saw she turned around for I didn't even realize it until she sort of turned for a split second and I saw badass on there and I was like, I don't know what the rest of it says, but I'm going to agree with it, whatever it
Yeah.
is.
Yeah, it was fantastic. And then Carol Off, who I've heard for years, I'd listened to her on the radio. I love her voice anyways. I loved hearing what she had to say about her book and the stories that she told outside of the book. I think I put a hold on the book for my library, like, during the session, because it is one I want to read.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved what she had to say. Like, she had 6 words, I think, right? Is what
Hmm.
the
I
book
think
was.
so.
And one of them was freedom, and she talked about it, and she mentioned how it's been co-opted for, like, the Freedom Convoy and stuff like that. And it's just, but her whole thing is that we need to take those words back and start using them the way that they're meant to be used. And that struck a chord with me, because every time I see a Canadian flag now in certain circumstances, I get really pissed
Yeah.
and upset because it has been taken away. So yeah,
I agree. I
yeah,
totally agree.
time to take those words back, mofos. Sorry.
Yep. No, I agree. I agree. I agree with that.
So
Exact
sorry.
100%.
Okay. Shall we move on to session 2?
Yes.
Okay. Why don't you start?
So I decided, even though this one was a challenge, because there were some really great speakers in this session, but
Mhm.
in the second session, I went to Women on the Move, and there were three women authors that the one taught, and I, by the way, I linked to the Eden Mills author session, so you can click on it and you can get it. You can see all the titles. So I'm not going to mention every title that everybody wrote, but anyway, Lindy Mashevsky, she wrote a book about what's that called? The Camino in Spain, where people walk the Camino
Oh, I
de,
don't know.
de Compostela, whatever it's called. Anyway, she walked it, but she's also a person who writes a lot of books about food. She's like a food writer. And so she talked about that. And then Pamela Malloy, she wrote a book about train travel, but it was fascinating. I liked her because she said often people will say to her, well, what was your favorite train ride? And she said, hey, I haven't ridden the big ones like the Siberian Express and the Oriental, Express, whatever it is. She said, I haven't done those, but hers was more about kind of like that smaller travel. Like she took trains from like Ontario, somewhere in Ontario to the East Coast, and she talks about that. So that book sounded really interesting as well. And that's actually why I went, was for that one.
Okay.
However, interestingly, the third author, Nicola Ross, she is the reason I ended up loving that session even more, because she wrote a book. Again, you'll see it if you click on the notes. She wrote a book about like 40 hikes in 40 days about the Bruce Trail. And I didn't know anything about the Bruce Trail in Ontario, but she talked so beautifully about how she grew up near the escarpment around the Niagara area, I guess, or I don't know. Well, I don't know where she grew up exactly. But anyway, she just talked about how that was her landscape and what these trails meant to her. And I don't know, when you come across somebody who is so passionate about something and they portray that, it grabbed me right away. So it's a book I did not pick up that day. But I figure the next time I'm in Sarnia at the Bookkeeper, I will get a copy of that book because that just sounded just she just made it sound so amazing. So I love that session. Those three women talking about women in travel. And that was one of the points they made is that there aren't a lot of women travel writers to the level that there are men. And it's often white men. So they are really kind of carving out a niche for themselves and for other women to jump in and write those kinds of books. And I loved it.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was a women in travels. That's a Rebecca session.
Absolutely.
Rebecca
Mm-hmm.
session. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I went to the session entitled "Let Me Tell You a Story," and this was the three authors. The first was Connie Gold, and her book was the Rasmussen Papers. It was interesting. Oh, I should say this was the session that Sydney Hegley, who you interviewed recently, this was the session she was supposed to be in.
Okay.
Connie ended up, when Sydney couldn't make it, this Connie popped in and replaced them. So Connie is not an author that I'm familiar with. And it sounds like the book, what I got from the gist of the book was that she was inspired by a Henry James book, but about a biographer and two women, and she kind of flipped it, and had like a female biographer and two men, inserting herself into the life of two men. That's all. I haven't read them. I'm not familiar with it. It was an interesting conversation, but it didn't grip me.
Mm-hmm.
The second author was David Hubert, and his book is Oil People. Also not an author I was familiar with. And the book talks about the petroleum industry, but in Ontario, which I did not realize we had one. And it's the history of the petroleum industry starting in Sarnia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like back in the 1800s, and then in the to contemporary times. It sounded fascinating, actually. It sounded really, I knew nothing about this period in history, geography, anything about it, but it sounded really good. And he was quite nice to listen to. Third author, which was the reason I was there, was Heather O'Neill with her new book, The Capital of Dreams. And she is delightful, Rebecca. So funny. She gave like little insights into her new book, into her writing process, her researching, her family background that helped, that also influenced the book and stuff like this. And she was just so funny, like really delightful. I could listen to her for hours. And even I went with my mom, and my aunt joined me. And if you watched Canada Reads last year, you know that Heather O'Neill talks a lot with her hands. So my aunt will just let me choose sessions, and she just goes along with it. But she was kind of like, those the hand thing drives me crazy. But by the end of it, all three of us were like, she's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't care. But it was fun to watch the hand, because she had to hold, one hand was holding a microphone while the other hand moved. And she would sometimes switch hands to the microphone so that the other hand could move.
Yeah.
And at one point, she had books in one hand and the microphone in the other. And she put the books down so she could use the hand. It was really, I'm making it seem like it was all about the hands. It wasn't. That was just like an aside that you couldn't help watching. But if you get a chance to see her in person or listen to her speak about her book, I would do it. She is really funny.
That is very cool to know. Yeah. I like that.
Yeah, so it was a good session.
Okay, I want to go back and just mention the titles because I just found in the guide, Tara, that where the titles are. So the first book about the Camino was Walk, Eat, Repeat, Culinary Adventures on the Camino de Santiago. And then Pamela Malloy's book is Off the Tracks, a meditation on train journeys in a time of no travel. And then Nicola Ross's is 40 Days and 40 Hikes, Loving the Bruce Trail, one loop at a time. So officially the titles are there now.
Okay, moving on to session 3, Rebecca. Where did you go?
I went to the Meadow, and it was personal stories on the page. So I saw E. McGregor, and she wrote What Fills Your House Like Smoke, which was a poetry it sounded like a really interesting mix. I think it was poetry, but I think she said it sort of told a story, almost like a fictional arc kind of thing. And it was about her grandmother. And as everybody probably knows at this point, I struggle a little bit with poetry, but I thought I didn't buy it, but I thought, I think I might look into this one because I loved how she talked about her grandmother. It got a few laughs. It was very funny, but because her grandmother sounded like she was a very feisty woman, and I do want to give it a try and see how well I can do it. And that was one of them. And then the next one was Zoe Whittall, and she wrote No Credit River. And this one was interesting because, again, it sounded like it was poetry, it was prose, it was auto fiction, it was fiction. I mean, she had this real mix, and it hadn't even been, she had a copy in her hand, but it wasn't even available to purchase yet because it's not quite ready to to be out in the world. But again, that one sounded fascinating the way she talked about it, because these were all personal stories on the page. So I kind of want to take a look at that one, see if I can find a copy at some point. I'd like to at least give it a try. Both great talks, but the one that freaking blew my mind was Danny Ramadan. He wrote Crooked Teeth, and the full title is Crooked Teeth, a Queer Syrian Refugee Memoir. And he was so funny. I don't even know. This is that kind of humor when people are this funny naturally. Like they just find the right word, the right intonation, the right way to say something that isn't like if you read it on a page, you might smile, but when you hear them speak the words, it is so freaking hilarious. So I fell in love with him. I just think he's so great. And Eden Mills was the first day of his book tour. So that was really cool. So I think if you have an opportunity to go see him, check him out, look up his book tour, go and listen to him live. I guarantee you will forever love this guy. He is just hilarious. So I am looking forward to reading that book for sure. That was the one. That's why I went to that session in particular. I wanted to hear him speak. How about you?
Okay, my session 3 was different in that it was just a single author with the moderator. So,
Oh, yeah,
yeah.
that's right.
So this one
Yes.
was called Our Green Heart, The Soul and Science of Forests. The author was Diana Beresford Kroger, a woman that I'm not familiar with, even though she is a world renowned biochemist, botanist, climate activist.
Yeah.
I wasn't familiar with her, but I went because I love nature books. So I was like, this, and I love books about trees. I'm like, this is the one we're going to. Powerhouse. Holy, this woman was amazing. She is 80 years old. She was introduced and she popped up. I'm not going to give it in the right order of how she did it, but after she was introduced, she stood up because she's like, I speak better when I stand. So she stood up and she just gave us her life story from an orphan in Ireland
Oh, wow.
to becoming a biochemist. And then when as a biochemist, she's like, I will tell you what I have accomplished, which I love. Like, how many times do you see people, women in particular, stand up and say, I'm going to tell you what I've accomplished and what you can thank me for. Because if you've
Cool.
had cancer, you can thank me for this treat. I'm like, it
Yeah.
was phenomenal to see. And then she also has here in Ontario her own farm that she is creating a global seed bank of all trees. But at the moment, she's really working on the collecting the seed bank and growing trees that are natural to Ontario. So
Ooh.
yeah, so this was her book, was her latest book. Oh my gosh, it's about so much. It was just she's so phenomenal. Oh, I also have to wrote down. I'm going to may paraphrase this a little bit, but she also said at one point, because she is a climate change activist, and she got up and she very forcefully said, "We will put the fire to the feet of the men making the decisions."
Mm,
Ah,
love
it
it.
was a brilliant moment because she has such hope. She has such hope. Like she knows what's going on in the world. She knows what's going on with climate change, with the trees, but she has such a strong sense of hope. She had said that for in every family or in each household, if each person in a household plants one tree for the next 6 years, we will stop climate change because we are releasing, the trees will be releasing the oxygen, and then we're taking the carbon dioxide out, right? And it's just like, well, we can all do that, right? She's phenomenal. Like it's you step out of this and you're like, I'm planting a tree. I will be planting a tree this year. I will be planting a tree every year. She then told us like a thing about forest bathing. That's how she ended it at the end, like with forest bathing, and said to go in, find a white pine, which is I did not realize this, is the provincial tree of Ontario. And for 15 minutes, like once a month, just walk around the tree, sit beside the tree, like just breathe in the tree because you're going to breathe in all these helpful chemicals that the tree releases, and just the whole has a whole thing. It's in her book. You must get the book. Apparently, she tells you so much, and you just leave going Googling, where can I find a white pine? Even my mother, who's not like, sorry if you're listening, Mom, but you know this about yourself. She's not a hokey pokey. She's not embracing this like hippie lifestyle. My
Mm-hmm.
mom walked out of that going, I need to find a white pine. I need to find a walk around this white pine. Like she's she does not mince words. She tells you exactly how things are, but then she gives you hope and the steps to take moving forward, right? Which I think is what we all want when it comes to climate change. We, at this point, if you don't know, there's lots of books that you can read about climate change, but they don't always give us actions, proactive steps that each person, an individual, can take that could make an actual difference. But planting a tree, we can all do that.
Mm-hmm. So she was, I mean, I know this sounds silly and trite, but she was an inspiration. She's an
She
inspirational
was
speaker. Mm-hmm.
totally. And her book has just been published. She is currently on tour. Like I think the next night she was at my local bookstore here in Burlington. So if you have a chance, run to wherever she is because she is funny, delightful, strong, forceful, a feminist. Like just get out there and see her. She's amazing.
Wow. Yeah. And it's so funny. Obviously, they knew that about her, which is why she was the only person on the panel
Yeah,
for that
she needed
session.
no one else. Although the moderator, I didn't get the name of the moderator. She was also fantastic. Like the two of them together were wonderful. But it was all about Diana, just
Yeah.
letting her talk.
Very cool. Has she written
Yeah.
a lot of books? Did you go back and look
Yes,
and see if she's written a lot?
this is
Yeah.
like her eighth book.
Oh, so you'll be going and you'll be reading some of those, I bet.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which is funny because you know that I love the Robin Wall Kimmerer, the American author with
Mm-hmm.
Braiding Sweetgrass. And she has a Moss book that I've read. And I think she has a new book coming out. So I'm very excited. But I've also been like, where's like my Canadian Robin Wall Kimmerer? Well, I found her in Diana
Excellent.
Beresford Kroger. So
Wow.
super
Very
excited.
nice. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. Okay. So the last session I went to, the topic was the way forward, and it was historical fiction. And there was one book in particular I really wanted to read, but also Leslie Shimo Takahara, who wrote Sisters of the Spruce, who I interviewed. And I wanted to hear Leslie speak publicly and I wanted to see her. And so I was really excited about that. So I saw Leslie. That was great. And then Edward Y.C. Leigh wrote The Laundryman's Boy. And it's basically based on his grandfather's story where he came from China, came to Canada, St. Catharines. Turns out there was a large population of Chinese workers in St. Catharines, Ontario. And he was working in a laundry but his father was a scholar and he had dreams of an education. And so it's about this fictional character, which is based on his grandfather. And first of all, he just had this, you know how some people just exude like this beautiful, like now I'm going to sound like very, very hippie and stuff, but this beautiful sort of aura, just like
Hmm.
around his face and his smile. And he just had this energy that was so calming and beautiful. And I thought, and then he read from it. And as soon as he read from it, I was like, I'm sold. That sounds like a great book. So I do want to read that one. So that's also, he was the second one. And then the third one was Barbara Jones Scott. And this is why I wanted specifically to go to hear her as well. She wrote a book called The Taste of Hunger, also based on her grandmother. And it is about the Ukrainian people settling in, is it Saskatchewan? Now I can't remember. I think it's Saskatchewan. I think so. And her grandmother, so it's based on her grandmother, loosely based on her grandmother. But so the main character, she's 15 years old and she is paired with a 29-year-old. She is absolutely miserable. And it really is kind of talking about the generational experience of the family with when it starts out with a young girl who doesn't want to be in this marriage, basically. Now, she does say when she read from it, I just thought this is where somebody truly writes literary fiction. The language of that opening was so beautiful. And she does admit she goes, it's not a depressing story, but it is a dark story. And I like that kind of stuff. So anyway, so I got to see all three of them. Uh, I'm getting more and more kind of into historical fiction. So I'm enjoying that whole process. And these three books, again, Sisters of the Spruce, I read and loved. The other two sound fantastic as well.
I noticed I'm not familiar with the Barbara Jones Scott, but I
Hmm.
was after that session, I was at the bookshelf table buying books, and there was like an influx of people looking for her books. So I had a feeling I was like, oh, like I'm like
Yeah.
she must have been good.
And let me just say too that I just throw this part in because I thought it was really funny. So all three books in that session were based on, because Leslie's book was also based on her grandmother. So all of them wrote fictional stories about their grandparents, which I loved. I really, really loved it. But Barbara's grandmother, she really goes into it was hilarious. The detail about how like ornery her grandmother was and how she was a tough old woman and whatever. So I said to her, because they ask if you have any questions, and I was literally sitting in the front row on the lawn, and I immediately raised my hand and I just said, Barbara, I, I said, what do you think your grandmother would have thought about this book if she had read your novel based on her life? And right away she just said, oh, she would not be happy with the amount of sex that's in it. She just would not like that. And everybody had a great laugh. But because that's what I was kind of thinking. It's like all three grandparents were kind of exposed on some level. And I just always think, what would the grandparent actually think if they read these novels? I just thought that was kind of fun.
Okay, my last session was in the meadow. I did not do all the walking that Rebecca did. I think I did two in the meadow, one in the cottage, and then back to the meadow. So I did not have to walk nearly as much, except when I was like, I think I got to go check out this book. I did walking to the book table.
Hmm.
So mine was called Finding Your Voice, and it was three genre authors. So we had Hannah Mary McKinnon with her latest thriller, Only One Survives, and she also writes Christmas holiday romances as well under a different name, but I can't remember now. So she was there. Interestingly, I was able to meet Hannah earlier in the day because, I'll just step back. I should have said. So the current book that I'm reading, my current read was Instagoner by Leigh. Sydney was at one of the first sessions that I went to, or the second session I think I went to
Oh,
this on that afternoon. So I introduced myself and she was there with Hannah. And Hannah's latest book is the book that my in-person book club is going to be reading this month as well. So that was a
hmm.
nice little like local connection that I was excited to meet Sydney in person before speaking to her later this week. So anyway, so sorry. So Hannah Mary McKinnon was there with her book. Robert J. Sawyer, not familiar with his stuff, although he was introduced as the godfather of Canadian science fiction.
Hmm.
His newest book is The Downloaded, and it sounded really good. He loves Star Trek. He is he was quite a personality too. He loves Star Trek, and The Downloaded was about if prisoners were given the chance to, instead of serving a prison term, to have their brain, their whatever, download it for like 6 months or a year, would they do that rather than serving a prison term? And the character in the book does that. But when his download period is over, I know I'm not using the right technology. He thinks he's coming back to his family, but it's 500 years in the future. And so I was like, it
Wow.
sounded fascinating. It sounded really good. Plus, he really talked well. I love it when authors can just really talk about their book, and you're like, I must read that book because it sounds fascinating, even though it might not be a genre that I'd normally read. And the final author, which was the reason I was there, was Drew Hayden Taylor, the author of Cold, which I read, I think, over the winter. Anyways, a few months ago. I'm going to do like Drew Hayden Taylor and not tell you who the monster in the book is, because it's a word that the Indigenous people don't say, because you might bring along its presence. So you'll have to read the book, but it's a horror book. It's so good. Set in Toronto in the middle of winter. Rebecca's going to read it because she loves cold books.
Yes.
And this one, you will be cold, and there is hockey, and it's just a fantastic book. So that's why I was there, to see him, because I loved that book. I wanted to hear him speak because he's pretty funny. It was lovely to hear him. And I even then, because I borrowed the book from the library, I ran over and I bought the book just so I could like get the chance to go up and have him sign it and meet him, which I did. And I was a bit goofball, but he's a goofball too, so it was fine. We were both like awkward goofballs around each other, but it was lovely.
Now, I know he writes, he's very funny in his writing. So
Mhm.
was he funny in his presentation, or was
Yes.
how was he?
Yes. Yeah. He was exactly like what I was expecting,
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And it was the three of them just talking about their writing and how they write their genre. It was a nice way to end the day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I wanted to see him, that because that was, so when Tara opened up by saying sometimes you have to make a hard decision, that was my hardest decision, because actually I had two hard decisions.
Yeah.
I wanted to see Tanya Talaga, and then our good friend Halle Gattery was presenting as well, and I really wanted to see her, but I have to admit, I did go to see Tanya. Same thing with Drew. I wanted to see him, but then I wanted to see Leslie and that other historical fiction author as well. So I had to make that hard decision, because I figured there's a million interviews I can watch with Drew Hayden Taylor.
Yeah.
But I won't be able to see it for the other three people. So that's why I made that decision. But
Yeah.
So can we now talk about books that we purchased?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
So as everybody knows, I always say I don't like to have a lot of physical TBR, because it kind of creates this weird anxiety for me, which, by the way, a friend shared a post this past week of somebody who spoke exactly how it causes them to feel, and that she literally only ever has 3 physical TBR, which I think that's phenomenal. And as soon as I saw it, I sent it to Tara and said, so I'm not alone. I'm not just the only person with this kind of crazy thing, that somebody else feels the same way. Now, she's great because she only has 3. I went to Eden Mills saying, I'm going to buy 2 books, these 2 books, and then it went off the rails.
How many did you buy?
It went off the rails. I'm going to say, I'll show you in a minute, but it completely went off the rails. So all I'm doing is feeding my own anxiety. What the hell? Anyway,
Okay.
So of course I bought Widow Fantasies by Halle. Exactly. We were both showing each other. We both bought it. I absolutely had to own this book because I loved her short fiction, and I love the cover of this book, and I needed to own it physically. She had given us an ARC, but I had to own it.
Likewise.
The other one I did was I did get Sisters of the Spruce by Leslie Shimo Takahara. Again, I had an ARC. I love this book so much. I wanted to own it, so I bought a copy. And that is where theoretically I was going to stop. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to show yours?
It's up to you. What do you think? I bought 3.
I'll let you go.
Okay. Well, I'll do so we already, as we said, the Halles, we both bought Halles, Widow Fantasies, and I was very excited because I then rushed over and I got Halle. I met Halle in person and had her sign the book, which was delightful. It was like a really nice moment to meet her in person.
And can I just say, I totally spaced because I forgot the way Eden Mills, because it's only my second year. So I
Mhm.
kind of forgot that right after they speak at their session, they go to a table and you can have them sign. And like an idiot, I totally forgot. And I was in a rush to get to the next session. And I totally blew past the opportunity to meet Holly in person. So I was very
Yeah,
bummed.
because I did say, I'm like, Rebecca's here too. Like, you know,
Anyway, so now I'm going to remind myself next year there is a procedure. It's not like Holly was going to stay till the bitter end and I could meet up with her at some other point. I needed to do it in the moment and I just completely spaced on it. So
well, you were in the moment yourself, though. You were in the moment of
I
Eden Mills,
was.
right?
You're right. I was overtaken.
Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Do you want me to go next?
Well, I'll do. Oh no, you do. You go ahead because you have more.
I went up to a table and it had children's books. And last year I bought some books for one of my nephews, great nephews, and he loved the book. So I thought, well, I'm going to go over and look at the kids' books again. So I went over and bought Salma, Salma series by Danny Ramadan, right? So I bought the 3 books. I thought, got some girls in my family. I thought they might really enjoy these books. And then this person was standing at the table and he said, would you like me to sign them for you? And I turned and looked and it was Danny. So I said, oh my gosh, absolutely. So he signed all the books. And then I did go back because I couldn't find it at first. I did go back and buy Crooked Teeth, a queer Syrian refugee memoir by Danny. And I'm very excited. And I did go back and have him sign, or his memoir. I had him sign it. So that's another, I had 2. Now I added 4 to the mix. Okay.
Well, that's.
Okay.
I didn't realize that Danny Ramadan wrote children's
Mm-hmm.
books.
Yeah. Because he did a reading from one of his children's books, the
Oh,
Salma books, during the day. I just didn't make it over to that session. I would have liked to have done
yeah,
that, but I didn't. So
because they do for those who have children. They have a whole like all the sessions we're talking about at the same time. There are sessions going on with children's authors too.
yes.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Okay, so the next book I bought is a short story collection, and it's called God Isn't Here Today by Francine Cunningham. I saw her last year at Eden Mills Writers
Oh,
Festival. She was there at one of the sessions I attended. So this book had been on my radar since then, and I hadn't seen it. The reason why I'm going to go with my potty mouth again, but it's not my fault this time because the name of the short story. So last year she had read the short story called "Come and Get Your Ice Cream, Motherfuckers," and it was I loved it. So then when I saw this book here at one of the tables, I think it was from the Invisible Publishing at their table, I was like, I've been meaning to read that book. So I grabbed that book, which I'm very excited about.
that's cool. I love
Yeah.
that. So you'll have to tell me about that short story. I might need to read that one in particular. So, okay. So of course, then let's see. I'll just do this one since this one we both bought. I did go over and buy a copy of Cold by Drew Hayden Taylor. And I was in line having other people sign books when Tara was in line to have Drew do it. So I threw her my book and said, here, get mine signed too. So she did get mine signed. So I appreciate that. So, but yeah, anyway, I have more to that story. But anyway, I did buy a copy of Cold and I am really looking forward because it's really, really high on my to be read list.
Mhm.
And especially after you said how much you liked it and it's cold and I'm ready for cold weather. And so I can't wait to read it.
Yeah. And it's creepy, but there's like an unexpected element. Oh, it's so good. I know. And I was like very flustered that's why sometimes I don't always go up and get my book signed because I get very flustered and awkward. So when I was talking to him and you're like, here, get my book signed, I was like, sure, no problem. And then talking to him and then I started to walk away and you're like, my book. And I'm like, because I totally forgot. I'm like, oh yes, can you sign this for Rebecca? And anyways, it was even our goodbye, I won't tell you, was a little awkward but funny kind of thing. But yes, I bought Gold as well.
You have to tell me the awkward goodbye because I have an awkward story with him as well after you left.
Oh, do you? Okay.
I'm so embarrassed. I mean, I'm so embarrassed. And the reason I feel I'm going to share this, I wasn't going to share this story, but I'm going to share
Yeah.
it because I want to show that I also feel the same way when you go up to speak to an author. Like to me, they are my kind of my gods, right?
Yeah.
Like I look at authors because I can't do what they do. And I don't care about athletes. I don't care about any actors. I don't care about it. But authors are like
Yeah.
my kryptonite, right? And I just want to prove that, yes, you can still embarrass yourself and be an idiot And I think they're okay. I hope to God they're okay. But
Yeah.
do it anyway, because everything I've heard, authors will say, please come up and talk to us. Come and talk to us. So
Yeah.
even when you screw it up, I think it's okay.
Yeah.
All right. What was your story?
Okay, so mine was even as soon as I went up, because as I said, I'd borrowed the book from the library, but then I wanted a copy. So even as I went up, I introduced myself, and I'm like, oh, I've actually already read the book, and I loved it. I'm blah, blah, blah. I borrowed it from the library. Too much information. He doesn't need to know that. And the poor man he's like, do you not want me to sign it then? Like, I don't know. He's like, because I think I was blabbing too much. And I'm like, no, please sign it. And he's like, okay. So then I don't even know what we chit-chatted then. And then finally, I think I left him alone. I got your book signed. And then I was leaving. Like, I'm like, okay, now I will let you be. And this was on his awkward, I think for him, he's probably going, what the hell did I just do? But he then went to me and did the sign of the cross and said, God be with you or something. And I did it back to him and went, God with you as well. And I walked away. I'm like, what did I just do? I'm like,
that is brilliant.
Did the
I
weirdest thing to each other. It was.
That is the best story ever. Oh my God.
I'm, like the $20 for the book, it was worth it to have that little interaction. So what did you do to the poor man afterward?
Okay, well, I have to tell you, because I wanted Leslie Shimotakahara to sign my book, the unfortunate thing was the two historical writers, Edward. So let me just say, I did buy The Laundryman's Boy. Yeah. So when I noticed that when I went up to the table, his nameplate was there. So I just stood there. And then, so Drew was next to him, and then Leslie was next to Drew. So all three authors that I, feel intimidated by, they're all sitting together, which I think made it kind of worse. So I did say to Edward Leigh, I did say how much I loved his reading, and I was trying to, not be over effusive, which is my personality. So I was trying to be, because he's got such a calm, gentle vibe about him. So I was being very calm and whatever. It was good. So he signed it. And then Leslie walked up, and there were people in line for Drew. So then, well, you were one of them. And so then I went over to Leslie, and she gave me a hug, which was so sweet. And it was a little awkward because the table was there. But anyway, so then I said, Leslie, I just had to own your book too. And so she said, well, do you want me to write a personal note? And I said, oh, that would be great. Thank you. So she's actually taking a little bit of time to do it, and nobody is in front of Drew. So I just leaned over and I said, I just have to tell you, I read Chasing Painted Horses, and I absolutely love that book. And he goes, that's actually my favorite. He said, because it was a play. It started out as a short story. It was a play. It's a book. I said, yeah, it's just amazing. I really loved it. And then because Leslie was still writing, I was like, now what do I do? Because he's kind of looking at me. Nobody else is there. And I didn't know, do I just look back at Leslie? I just felt so stupid in that moment. So I said, I picked up a play that you wrote. I said, I can't remember the title, but I haven't read it yet, but I did pick up a play by you as well. And then, because again, I don't know when to stop, I said to him, by the way, I said, I have this podcast and I'd love to have you. Do you do podcast? Like, of course he does podcasts. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, for God's sake. So he just said, sure. Yeah, sure. Of course. And I said, okay, I'll be in touch. And I thought, God damn. I was couldn't you have just stopped it? I love Chasing Painted Horses, because I felt like I just kept digging. I was sinking below the earth as I was sinking into the pit I was digging myself. Anyway, I just felt so embarrassed. And I just thought, God, why did I do all that? Why didn't I just you know what I mean? So anyway, so he may or may not be on our podcast. If I reach out to him, he'll probably be like, no, that wackadoodle woman, I am not talking to her. There's no way. So maybe I'll have you reach out to him and act like he'll never remember the podcast anyway. So I figure you could just be like, oh, would you like to be on a podcast? Anyway, so.
And maybe he won't remember any of it. When I first went up to him, he was like, this is too early in the day for me. It was 5:30 people in the evening. And
he was like, oh, it's too early.
So he may have been, maybe.
I love that. Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. I don't think they probably do. They see so many people, and you're right. So I feel I'm going to let that just water off a duck's back.
Yep.
I love your interaction though. You did the sign of the cross.
I know.
That is
I was
hilarious.
harkening back to my like Catholic school days for that.
Yeah. I love it. Anyway, so let me just say, so the last book I bought,
Okay.
I did get The Taste of Hunger by Barbara Jones Scott. And I did ask her as well if I could. I said, I'm really excited to read your book. And I said, I want to read it first, but would you be interested in being on the podcast? And she said, absolutely. So I definitely know that I feel very strongly that I will love this book. And at some point, maybe this year, hopefully sometime this year, I will be able to interview Barbara about this story, because hearing her talk about it was fascinating. I think all of you would enjoy hearing. Those of you who like historical fiction, I think you will love it as well.
I'm enjoying your historical fiction journey, by the way. I'll just put that in there.
Part of it has been in the past. I think I was reading like maybe not literary historical fiction, and I was struggling with it because it never felt like authentic to the time period. But now that I'm reading literary historical fiction, now I know that the authors are doing a lot of research. They're making it as authentic as they can. And that is what I find absolutely fascinating. But you're right. I have been reading a lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So I purchased one more book, and mine also purchased from Invisible Publishing, based solely on the person who was working the table said, oh, this book's terrifying. I'm like, sold. And it's called Terror by Erica McKeen. It's her debut novel, I believe. I looked it up. And it is about a young woman who is on the brink of graduating from university. She can't remember there being a lock on the door at the top of the basement stairs. Yet when she turns the door, the knob won't open. She can't tell the difference between childhood memories. And worse still, she can't ignore the very real tapping sound now coming, threatening to break through her bedroom wall. And then I was like, this sounds so good. I didn't even read the back of it out until after I purchased it. And then I read a little review somewhere online that said there was like feminist rage. I'm like, oh my God, yes. So I'm very excited to read this one as well.
It has a super amazing cover.
Very creepy.
Yeah.
Very creepy cover. Yeah.
And it sounds really good. And I look forward to your review, because all of what you just read, all of that would be a triggering fear thing for me. And I would never, I don't think I could ever read it, but yeah, let me know.
Yeah. It might be for me as well, but yeah, I had to. Anyways, that's it. That's our Eden Mills 2024. Thank you for coming up and enjoying it with me.
And of course, thank you for telling me about it initially. And like I said, for as long as that festival is around, I will be there every year in September. And we just really want to encourage everyone, because I guarantee you, even just being out in that beautiful environment, the landscape is so gorgeous out that area, and you just kick back, relax, and enjoy yourself and have a great day. We certainly did.
Yeah, we did. Okay, happy reading, everyone. Thank you for joining us on our bookish journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing Canada Reads American Style wherever you listen. You can connect with the podcast and Rebecca on Instagram at Canada Reads American Style, and with Tara at On a Branch Reads. Until next time, keep reading.